The baseball world converges on Orlando, Florida today for the beginning of the winter meetings. And one of the big rumors is the Mets are interested in Kyle Schwarber.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. On the show today, we're going to do some rumor roundup. We're going to talk about the winter meetings, and I'm going to get into a very controversial take I had on social media that I got a lot of blowback for today. So the first segment, we're going to talk about the rumors the New York Mets are interested in Kyle Schwarber. In the second segment, we're going to talk about some of the rumors surrounding the Mets when it comes to adding pitching to this roster. Final segment, I will set a winter meetings wish list for the Mets, break down all the events that are going to take place over the next couple of days, and then we're going to close on that controversial take I had. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the number one daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. All right, so first rumor up on an episode where we're going to discuss a lot of rumors. Kyle Schwarber is a fit for the New York Mets. There's been some reports the Mets are interested in Schwarber. Buster Olney went on the Just Baseball show. Just Baseball is where I work. They talked about a lot of what he's hearing right now. And one of the things that he was hearing, which he reported about for ESPN, was that the New York Mets are interested in signing Kyle Schwarber. Does this make sense for the Mets to get Schwarber as the Pete Alonso replacement? Personally, I don't love it because I have talked about this for a minute now, that there is a world with the New York Mets poach Schwarber from the Phillies and then Pete Alonso ends up on the Phillies. I actually had a NL East predictions article that we did at justbaseball.com. Basically, it's a series we're doing where we're taking each division, our editorial team, which is myself and a couple of our editors. We sat down on Monday and we just picked for each team one ideal player that could be added via trade or free agency, and they had to be a new player added to a roster. And one of my fellow editors suggested that Pete Alonso going to the Phillies would be a perfect move for Philly. So as I'm writing at the article, I have to make this case for why the Phillies would want Pete Alonso. And honestly, I talked myself into the fact that it would be a great fit for the Phillies because it would do a couple of things. For one, it could replace the power production they'd be losing if Kyle Schwarber signed elsewhere. But also, I think Pete Alonso is a better complement to Bryce Harper than Kyle Schwarber is because you had the left-right combination, and Pete Alonso has played over the past 4 years. His entire career has been healthy, but you look at what Pete Alonso has done, particularly since 2021 at first base. 152 games, 160 games, 154 games. In the last 2 years, 162 games apiece. Pete Alonso would allow Bryce Harper to DH more. Those two guys would split first base and DH. You keep Bryce Harper healthier. Come October, Bryce Harper is going to play first base. Pete Alonso is going to DH, but it would help both of those guys get through the season. And if you put Pete Alonso to Citizens Bank, over the past 3 seasons, his expected home runs by park would be over 46 home runs every season. I think it was 46 home runs in 2023 and 47 each of the last 2 years. What has Kyle Schwarber done in Philly across a 4-year contract? He's averaged 46 home runs a season. So I don't love this idea of the Mets signing Schwarber because of that, fallback of Pete Alonso potentially signing with the Phillies. And I would just hate if that series of transactions took place. And I would be nervous that Pete Alonso might end up in Philly on a more team-friendly deal than Schwarber ended up with the Mets. And he could outproduce Kyle Schwarber and make the Mets regret it. So I don't like this idea of the Mets in on Schwarber because of that. But if we remove the Pete Alonso side of it and you just focus on what Kyle Schwarber would bring to the New York Mets, there's some reasons why they should be interested. Kyle Schwarber is power production, 100%. he's going to hit his home runs even if he moves out of Citizens Bank. This past season, Kyle Schwarber was better than Pete Alonso. He was, runner-up in MVP? You have Schwarber hit 56 homers and driven 132 runs. Unbelievable production. He's going to walk at an elite clip. 14.9% this past season. Throughout his entire career, his walk rate is over 14%. Outside of 2023, actually, look at it in 2022, his on-base percentage was down too, but the last 2 seasons, his on-base percentage has been right at 365, essentially. So he's going to get on base. He's going to hit his home runs. He is the number one just pure 3 true outcome hitter, where it's walks, it's strikeouts, it's homers. But there's a lot of production there. And I think the reason why you would want Kyle Schwarber instead of Pete Alonso is because it would give you a new voice in that clubhouse. Very similar to the Marcus Semien for Brandon Nimmo trade. It's getting a guy who's been a leader with his team and bringing a new leader into that Mets clubhouse. It also opens up possibilities at first base because now Mark Vientos has the inside track to being your first baseman. If you don't trade Jeff McNeil, you have McNeil as the counter to Vientos at first base, a guy that can probably play a better, defensive first base, can be a left-handed bat to complement Vientos. And then you have Ryan Clifford waiting in the wings. If the New York Mets are really high on Ryan Clifford's ability to be their first baseman of the future, you have Vientos get the first crack at it, but then you have Clifford coming. And yes, you locked in your DH and Schwarber, but if you can get Schwarber on a 3-year deal and first base is open for Vientos, Clifford, Jacob Reimer's coming through the system, I can start to understand it. I hate the idea of signing Schwarber and now Philly can retaliate by getting Pete Alonso. It does seem like the market is moving quicker on Schwarber than Alonso on the Just Baseball show. Buster Olney said that Schwarber is more of the linchpin right now to the position player market than Kyle Tucker because there's so much widespread interest beyond just the Mets and the Phillies. The Reds are interested. The Red Sox could be interested. There's a lot of teams that might want to get in on Schwarber. He's a really good hitter. I'm not going to be mad at the Mets sign a guy that hit 56 home runs last season, but I'm still in the camp of just bring back Pete. I think that he still fits this team better than Schwarber. It's still the right-handed bat instead of the left-handed bat. I do worry that Schwarber just had the best year of his career and is not going to be able to get back to that level again. And the fact that he's going into his age 33 season when Pete Alonso is going into his age 31 season, and based on what we're hearing right now, which is that Pete Alonso's market is not materializing, I think there's a chance that these guys get similar contracts too. There's a world where Kyle Schwarber still gets a 4-year deal. There's an even crazier world where he gets a 5-year deal. I think it likely falls in at 4. I still think that Pete Alonso might ultimately get 5, but right now, I mean, there's been some people who are reporting he's not even going to get 4 years. So if that's the case, it feels like you're better off waiting out the market on Pete Alonso. But what I will say is that the Mets are interested in Schwarber to drive up the price tag for the Phillies. I love that. If Schwarber is the Phillies' number one priority this offseason, I think all indications are he sort of is, make it a little bit tougher on your division rival to get their guy back, driving up that price tag a little bit. Not the worst bit of maneuvering for the New York Mets. So that is the first big rumor that we haven't talked about in the show. I don't think I've done any Kyle Schwarber to the Mets content this offseason. So there you have it. Wouldn't hate the move. I'd like Kyle Schwarber on the Mets. I'd hate the move if Pete Alonso's on the Phillies. And that's just where I am with it. In the next segment, though, we're going to run through some other rumors about the New York Mets right now. Also, just rumors about the market. Tarik Skubal suddenly back on the table. A lot to discuss. We're going to go through that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back. There's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And during the season, you can get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you're going to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So one of the rumors that we've heard over the last couple of days here, all of a sudden now reports are the Twins are taking their stars off the market. Reports have suggested that the Twins have been contemplating what they want to do with Joe Ryan and Byron Buxton and Pablo Lopez, and now they have come to the conclusion internally that they might want to build around those stars and take a crack at winning in 2026. This is one of two things. Either the Twins front office is incompetent, doesn't have a clear direction from ownership on what they want to do, which could be another part of it. So I don't want to just completely say they're incompetent because you never know. If ownership says we don't want to tear it down anymore, we want to try to win, then you have to follow ownership, even if you know as a front office that what you did at the deadline, you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube on that. You already started the rebuild. You have 3 premium assets on the trade market that can get you real future value if you traded them. So you should move all those guys. But if ownership says not to, then that's pretty much what you're stuck with. So either that's what's going on, or this is just trying to drum up even more value for their players by saying, "Oh, we're not trading them." Knowing how much teams wanted Joe Ryan, for example, then maybe you're going to get a over-the-top trade return by posturing in this way. So that's one of the things. Now, the other interesting little rumor that's going around is Tarik Skubal's back on the market again. Not that he ever potentially left the market. We've been very it's just been unclear. It's been unclear all offseason what the Tigers are going to do. They've come out and they said that they wanted to build around Skubal for this upcoming season. They're trying to win. Yet it's a 1 or 2 time opportunity to cash in a trade asset like this. They're either going to trade him now or they're going to trade him at the deadline if they want to get an incredible return. Otherwise, they're going to get the draft pick compensation that's tied to the qualifying offer. I don't even know how that works with the CBA coming to an end because the qualifying offer system could disappear. Now, granted, the CBA expires, I want to say, if it's like last time, it might have been the middle of, let me see, I can actually look this up real quick. When does the MLB CBA expire? December 1st. So maybe the qualifying, because the qualifying offer would have been resolved by that point. So maybe that's still part of next offseason and they will get the draft picks. Regardless, if they want to cash in, this would be the time to do it, because if you wait and you're hanging around the race at the deadline, but you're not a World Series contender, if you trade Skubal, but you were close enough to the race or close enough to a division, it's going to get way more fan pushback than if you trade him for a haul right now. Fans aren't going to like it no matter when you do it, but if you're going to do it, you should probably do it now. The fact that door is cracked again, you have to explore it. But what is the cost for a reigning 2-time Cy Young who's a rental? It's a tough trade to make, and one that might just cost too much on the prospect capital side of things, that it makes more sense to just wait it out. That's what they did with Juan Soto. They did not trade for him when they could have going into the 2024 season. They waited it out. He played a year with the Yankees, and then they signed him. So you could do that again with Skubal. Freddy Peralta is back on the market. That's another rental starting pitcher that you could trade for, but you have a much better chance extending Freddy than you do Skubal, because Skubal is represented by Scott Boras. Freddy Peralta, I believe, is represented by Aces, who have signed plenty of contract extensions for their clients in the past. Now, the trade market is reportedly hotter right now than the free agent market. Teams are looking at this expiring CBA, which I've said that a couple times. So for those of you who aren't aware, the collective bargaining agreement is the agreement between the players union and MLB owners that has allowed us to enjoy baseball, from, what was it? It was the 2021 offseason going into 2022 when they came to this new agreement. And it was a 5-year deal. So the 5-year deal is up December 1st of next year. And there's a lot of talk about another lockout or what was it called again? Not a straight lockout. I mean, is there another word for it other than the lockout? Doesn't even matter. Last time they locked out in December and they had a deal in place where we didn't miss any games. But if there's more fear this time that you're going to miss games, this could change the market. And one way that it could change the market is teams who have a player, let's just say the Nationals with Mackenzie Gore. Mackenzie Gore, if you have 2 years of team control, but you don't know if there's going to be a season in 2027, you should trade Mackenzie Gore now to cash in. Theoretically, same thing would apply with Joe Ryan. Also, if you're going to give out long-term deals, there are some teams that might prefer to just wait till they put a new long-term contract on their books until a new CBA is agreed upon, and then they know what the constructs are that they're working within before they give out a huge commitment. So that could impact somebody like Kyle Tucker, where maybe the $350 to $400 million deal that we all expected him getting just isn't there. And maybe that leads to him signing something crazy. Maybe if you're the Mets, you can just throw caution to the wind and throw $45 to $50 million at Kyle Tucker for one season and give him a 1+1. I don't know. Buster only said that was a possibility that Kyle Tucker would sign a 1+1. I don't know if I entirely buy that, but if it's out there and that there's a chance, yeah, it could cause a pretty interesting situation. So the bottom line here is that this is going to be a very unpredictable market. The trade market seems to be hotter right now just because I think teams are trying to exhaust some of those options first, or maybe you're trading for a player with more control. Maybe you are locking in a more fixed asset in terms of a player with 2 years of arbitration that's going to fill a similar need than the starting pitcher and free agents you have to give 5 years to. And so it's that give and take. But right now, seems like there's more going on in the trade market, which could lead to a little bit of a quieter winter meetings in terms of free agents that sign. But the closer market has been moving, so I'd still expect more closers and relievers to come off the board. Also, the starting pitching market seems to be percolating a little bit, and we could see some movement, whether that is a big trade for one of these starting pitchers. And I'd imagine we see at least one big-time starting pitcher traded, whether that's one of the Marlins guys, whether that is Mackenzie Gore, whether the Twins do go back and what they're saying about keeping their stars, whether it's Skubal or Peralta. I feel like we're going to get a big starting pitcher trade at this winter meetings, and we could see some free agents sign as well. The Mets have been linked to Framber, Valdez, Tatsuya, Imai, and Michael King. Ranger Suarez, I've also seen them loosely linked to as well. No reporting about them being linked on Zach Gallen. So it seems like maybe Zach Gallen is off the table. We thought he actually would be literally off the table because Gallen was reportedly going to Chicago, as Bob Nightingale reported that on Saturday, only to be completely and totally wrong, and he is still a free agent. Center field, there's still the chance that the Mets could be in that market at the winter meetings. You have Luis Robert that they've been linked to. They've also been linked to the Houston Astros center fielder, Jake Myers. Give you the short on those two guys. Luis Robert, if you don't give up Mark Vientos or any of your top 10 prospects, I am interested in Luis Robert. If it is a trade center around Luisangel Acuña, I can definitely talk myself into it. If it's a trade center on Mark Vientos, I think I'm out on that. And if you have to give up anything in your top 10 prospects, I think I'm out on that as well. Nick Morabito is not in your top 10 prospects. So that's sort of as far as I'd be willing to go, as far as how good of a prospect I'd be willing to put on the table for Luis Robert. Jake Myers, the guy can't hit. I know he had a good season, but he had a lot of BABIP luck, which is batting average on balls put in play. He hit 290 when he previously hit nowhere close to that. The power went away. He's a great defender, but it's a left-handed Tyrone Taylor who stopped hitting for power before he gets traded to the Mets instead of after, like Tyrone Taylor did. I just don't like that one. But they've been connected, so you might as well mention it. The Mets could sniff around still on Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger. I'm sure they're going to stay locked into the markets on those guys, see where they end up. If there isn't a market materializing for Kyle Tucker, that's where you could swoop in. Whether it is a short-term deal like I described, or whether you are saying, this is an opportunity to sign Kyle Tucker to a long-term deal at an AAV way lower than we expected coming into the offseason. Of course, Cody Bellinger would fit the Mets in a lot of ways with his defensive versatility and his ability to come into the fold, play in New York, be a left-handed bat that helps you in a corner outfield spot, who could even, spare whoever is the first baseman a little bit and potentially take over at first base in a couple of years. So there's a lot of ways the Mets can play things. And of course, the last thing to mention right now, I mentioned the closer market moving. Edwin Diaz, Pete Alonso, still on the market. Mets are still interested. So that's, of course, something we'll keep tabs on if any stories develop out of that, if there's any rumors, any reporting, or of course, if a deal gets done. I think it's very unlikely that Pete Alonso signs during the winter meetings. Both Edwin Diaz, I think that's a distinct possibility, which will lead us into our final segment here. I want to go through a winter meetings wish list. Things that are realistic to happen over the coming days that I would like to see happen. We'll also go through a schedule of events for the winter meetings, and then we will close the show with a topic that if you follow me on Twitter, you probably know what it's about, because you might have seen a lot of people not liking an idea I had about trading for Luis Severino. For watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers. And thank you for making Locked On Mets your first watch or first listen every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, let's start things off with just the schedule of events here. Winter meetings, everything you need to know. You can look up that article. We have it go up for just baseball a couple weeks ago now. And essentially, this just lays out all of the series of events. First things first, dates of the winter meetings, December 7th through the 10th here in Orlando, Florida. Today, people are just showing up. Shouldn't be too many things that happen. The one big thing tonight is you're going to have the Contemporary Baseball Era Committee Hall of Fame vote. So there's a 16-member committee that will meet and discuss the candidates for the Contemporary Baseball Era Hall of Fame ballot, and they will cast their votes, and the results will be announced later that evening on MLB Network. The 8 players that are under consideration this year, you got Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, got a couple of former Mets, Carlos Delgado, Jeff Kent, Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, and Fernando Valenzuela. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those names get elected to the Hall of Fame through this committee. I would be very surprised if Bonds and Clemens get there, but I'm still a proponent of those guys making the Hall, just because of how incredible their resumes are. Carlos Delgado, I would love to see it. I know if you are a fan of the other team in New York, Don Mattingly is what everyone is looking at. Gary Sheffield, I think, is a Hall of Famer too. You can make a case for all these guys. But if I had to pick one out of this list, my personal bias, I'd say Delgado. But that's just me. You're also going to have some awards that are announced. The Ford Frick Award, which is for excellence in broadcasting. You have the BBWAA Career Excellence Award, which every year the BBWA celebrates a writer for their meritorious contributions to the field. Scout of the Year will be awarded. Then you're going to have the MLB Draft Lottery, which will take place on Tuesday. Mets have a very slim chance of getting a top 6 pick in the draft. Their chances are 0.67% to get the first overall pick, and then their odds would go up from there for every subsequent pick. But not likely the Mets will storm up the boards. It would be amazing if they did, though. Otherwise, their pick will fall 10 slots. And I want to say that's going to put them, I want to say it was 28th. I think they're 18th, so they would lock them down to 28th in the upcoming draft, but don't quote me on that one. When's the Rule 5 draft? That's going to be on Wednesday. That usually is sort of the end of the winter meetings, the Rule 5 draft. The Mets, they protected Nick Morabito. Not a lot of names that we really have to talk about getting protected here. Well, no one's getting protected, but getting taken from the Mets. Kevin Parada could go, a catcher that is in AAA, so maybe a team takes a flyer there. Saul Garcia, I've heard some people talk about him as a guy that could get selected, a reliever in the Mets system, but I don't think you're going to lose anybody of too much consequence. And there's a chance the Mets select somebody in the Rule 5 draft, which would be a lot of fun if they do. So that is the list of main events here at the winter meetings. And then obviously it's just all the agents are there. A lot of the free agents are there. You have all the executives there. So it is a good time for trades to get made or free agent signings to take place. But also in recent years, we've seen winter meetings where nothing really happens and it's really slow. So I can't guarantee that we're going to see a ton of action. I'd imagine, though, some things move in this market. And the now transition into the Mets wish list here, I think Edwin Diaz could sign over the course of the winter meetings, and I would hope that he signs with the Mets. So if I set my priorities for this winter meetings, getting Edwin Diaz done, getting that contract locked in would be huge for this team because now your bullpen's pretty much set. Yes, there's a lot more that has to take place, but the Mets can fill out their bullpen beyond that, waiting out the market, identifying arms that they like. They don't have to then go out and spend on another significant addition to be a setup man. They still could, don't get me wrong, but I think they can then play in the market that they had last year where Ryan Stanek, they picked him up for, let's say, like around $5 million. I think they can shop in that bracket instead of some of the guys like Sir Anthony Dominguez, Tyler Rogers, guys that might get even close to $10 million on a contract to be a setup man. If you have Edwin Diaz and Devin Williams, you're in a really good spot. You still have AJ Minter coming off the injury. You have Brooks Raley. You got some options. Edwin Diaz is my number one item on a wish list for the Mets this winter meetings. If they got that locked in, I feel really good. Number two, land a top starting pitcher. That could be through trade. That could be signing a top starting pitcher. I'm coming around more and more on the idea of Framber Valdez as a free agent signing I could get behind. The fact that you have Marcus Semien and Francisco Lindor to play defense behind him up the middle, that's huge for me. The fact that this guy is just a durable workhorse, that's big. I think the Mets need a couple of guys that can pitch deep into games and can make every start. That's what I'd be looking for. Not even a couple guys. They need one guy to just take the pressure off everybody else in the rotation. And Framber Valdez could be that guy. If I had to pick any arm, of course, I'd take Skubal or Freddy Peralta as my number one wish. But I'm just saying that when it comes to free agency, if there's an arm the Mets should get to me, it's Framber or it's Tatsuya Imai, because there's a lot of upside with Imai as well. Michael King, I am in on that idea, but if you're going to get King because of the injury concern coming off a season where he only made about half of his starts, I feel like you need to find another pitcher that can be the durable workhorse you can count on along with what you already have, in-house with, of course, Nolan McLean, Clay Holmes, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, the list goes on and on. You get into the top prospects, everything else. Another wish list item would just be being engaged on the outfield market. Something just tells me that the Mets are not going to shop at the very top when it comes to the outfielders like Steven Kwan or Jarren Duran. I love Jarren Duran. That would be my ideal target to fill this outfield. I don't know if they're going to put together the package of prospects that it takes to land him. It seems more like they would be willing to take a flyer on a stopgap because I think they're very high on the outfielders in their system and the fact that they could have a couple of guys like AJ Ewing and Carson Bench rounding on an outfield with Juan Soto for years to come. Another big, I would call this not even a wish list, but just a task for the winter meetings for the Mets is to be engaged on trading some pieces that they are willing to move off of their roster that they have been kind of rumored to be shopping. Kodai Senga, Jeff McNeil, Luisangel Acuña doesn't have any options. Mark Vientos doesn't have any options. If you sign Schwarber, is Vientos your first baseman, or are you looking to move him and do something else at first base? If you are keeping Jeff McNeil, are you trading Luisangel Acuña? And Kodai Senga was, quote, extremely available. So would the Mets decide to move him? I think you have to be engaged on those guys because, if you have deemed those players as not worthy of a roster spot, not even not worthy of a roster spot, but players that you want to move off of, this is the time to really get a good sense of what you can trade them for, which leads us to the conclusion of the show today, a take I had that people hated. And the crazy thing is, if you read this tweet, people jump to the conclusion that I would make this trade. All I was asking is I was putting a trade framework out there on what I think the value of Jeff McNeil and Kodai Senga is if you package them together. I said McNeil and Senga for Luis Severino, straight up, no cash heading either way. Who says no? Mets fans overwhelmingly commented, the Mets say no, and they hate this, and I'm an idiot. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have no sense of the market. Well, listen, here's why I put together this framework and this idea. Jeff McNeil's owned $17.75 million. $15.75 million for this upcoming season, a $2 million buyout on another $15.7 million club option for 2027. Kodai Senga is still owed $28 million over the next 2 years. They combine to make over the next 2 seasons $45.75 million. Severino is still owed $42 million over the next 2 years. So the New York Mets, if they made this trade, they'd actually be saving close to $4 million, but it's not even about that to me. Here is why I threw this out there. Kodai Senga, if you trade him now, you are selling low. Kodai Senga at best right now is a net neutral asset, maybe a little bit better, but you have to remember this is a guy that has been hurt the last 2 years, has been inconsistent because of his second half, and finished the year in AAA. While teams would love to take a flyer, while teams would love to take that contract off of your hands, are they going to give you a top prospect for him? I doubt it. Are they going to give you a useful piece for this upcoming season? Maybe. But how much more useful than a pitcher that can give you 180 innings? That's where the Severino component came in. Also, before I get to Severino, Jeff McNeil is a negative asset on this market. I have made the case on this show the Mets should be keeping Senga and McNeil because they are not going to get a return for them that is better than the floor that McNeil brings to your bench and the ceiling that Senga brings to your rotation. I would not make this trade. I never said that I would. But do I think that this is a fair trade for both sides? It's a lot fairer than you think, because the reason you'd make this trade, if you, as a front office, deem Luis Severino a more valuable pitcher to your team over the next 2 years than Kodai Senga, then you would make this trade because the money is pretty much even. You'd be getting off of McNeil, which would be something that the Mets are trying to do. And you'd be bringing in a pitcher that is going to eat innings for you, and a pitcher who is a lot better than the 4.54 ERA he had this past season, which everybody looks at the ERA and then they fire off their reaction. Do you know front offices don't even look at ERA? They don't. They look at the underlying data and they look at what the expected ERA is. They look at what they can project, not what happened. And for Luis Severino, they'll see a 6 ERA at home and a 3 ERA on the road, and they're going to think Luis Severino is a lot better than the 4.54 ERA. Luis Severino is probably a pretty safe bet to pitch to a high 3s ERA in a new environment, one that he's already excelled in 2024. And he is a much, 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 much safer bet to give you 30 plus starts and 160 to 180 innings. Is it a trade that I would make? No. I would bet on the upside of Senga and I would just sign Framber or trade for Freddy Peralta and I'd call it a day. I call it a day because Kodai Senga has the upside to start game 1 of a playoff game. Luis Severino does not. But Kodai Senga has the floor of making 5 starts that are disastrous and being hurt all year. Luis Severino has the floor of pitching to a 4.54 ERA and giving you 160 plus innings pitch, which you could say, oh, 4.54 ERA, that's terrible. He's not very good. Well, I'll tell you what, 160 innings are valuable. If the Mets had Luis Severino on their team this past year instead of Frankie Montas, they make the playoffs. They do. And if they have him in the second half, it would have been a big difference maker because it's just a guy that can get you into the 6th inning. And with the infield defense the Mets have now put together, Severino is not the worst addition the Mets can make. Is it my number 1 target? Absolutely not. Would I want to trade Kodai Senga for him? No. I'd prefer to trade Senga for a top prospect that you really like if a team actually puts that on the table. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that Senga does have more value on the market and you can find that trade. I'd rather just trade Jeff McNeil for Luis Severino straight up and move Senga's money in a different deal where you get prospects back and then it's prospects, plus you're getting Severino and you're still trading the same 2 guys. Like that would be much better. My point in putting this out there is if you're going to shop these 2 guys together, Luis Severino is probably the best you're going to do because to get a team to take $46 million off of your hands that you don't want on your books, you're not getting positive assets back. You're going to take on somebody else's money just like you did when you found a landing spot for Brandon Nimmo. That was the point of the tweet. Not to say I'm doing this trade tomorrow. The point of the tweet was to show what the market value is for Jeff McNeil and Kodai Senga if you package them together, and to throw out there a possible trade where you get back a guy who is a lot better than the numbers would suggest this past season, who couldn't pitch in that minor league ballpark, but when he was on the road, he had a 3 ERA almost flat. It was like 3.01 over 14 starts, who has now thrown 2 consecutive seasons where he's made every single start. And making every single start is valuable in Major League Baseball. That's why the Mets are looking to move off of Kodai Senga in the first place. Because as David Stern said, it would be foolish to expect him to make 30 starts. That's the complicated nature of trading Kodai Senga. That's why I wouldn't do it. I would just hold on to him because it doesn't make a lot of money, and the ceiling is so immensely high. You should just take that flyer and hope that this year is the year that he puts it all together again, or that he puts it together for half of the season, but it's the right half of the season, and you get Kodai Senga dialed in October. That's what I want to see, but this was just to explain where things are at and how hard it is to find trades for these guys. And also to spotlight the fact that Luis Severino is not a bad addition if the Mets decided that he is a buy low candidate that you can make work, because they did it already. And you look at the data and it doesn't tell you that this guy sucks. It tells you that this guy sucked when he pitched in Sacramento. That's it. That's all. I'm done. Thank you all for listening to today's show. I appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.